Welcome to a brilliant edition of ARG Presents. I'm your good buddy, Professor Amigo Aaron, joined by a man who, much like the namesake of today's computer, turned in a scientific formula that was so close, but he was the laughingstock of the scientific community with the term E equals MC banana. I give you the Brent.
You should have went with a different geometric shape.
No,
You should have
banana.
went with E equals MC circle.
No, banana.
And then I could have rapped.
Listen, no, we don't want that. What is that? How's it going today, the Brent?
It is going okay. It is okay at the Brent household.
Well, that's good to hear, my friend. We had an interesting week. Here it was. We were just coming off New Year's, and Brent, tell the people how you spent your New Year's.
Asleep.
That's it, huh? Just slept the whole time, eh?
Yep. We went to bed early. We had nowhere to go and no one to be with, so we went to bed.
That is what a tale, ladies and gentlemen. I, on the other hand, had all kinds of exciting adventures, playing video games with my friends over the internet. That was what I did, and no drinking, by the way. It was one of those nights just sat around. That's a good way to end 2020. Sitting around in your house. That's the one thing I'll remember about it.
I talked about Good Matt. I was like, Good Matt, are you going to have your awesome Happy New Year party? He was like, no. I was like, okay.
You know, last year for New Year's, we had a great time at Matt's, our good buddy Matt. And I drank all night and sang Rock Band till the wee hours. It was glorious. I was in great voice that night, I might add. The people were crying. They were so impressed. It was so moving.
Because you wouldn't stop drinking.
I'll take off. Listen, what? I can't believe you'd say that. Nevertheless, speaking of crying, we spun the wheel, and the wheel is a minefield of pain right now. It is all kinds of wacky stuff, and you knew we couldn't keep dodging those mines, and we didn't. We landed on a big fat one this week, and so we're going to be taking a look at a little system. Bam. It's the Tatung Einstein, Brent. Is that the way you would pronounce that? How do you see that being pronounced? Is that Tatung?
No, see, what you do is you drop that first part and just call it the Einstein.
That's the lamest thing I've ever heard.
Yeah.
You know, I had never heard of this one, Brent. Had you?
No.
I knew you hadn't.
Never heard of it in my life.
I knew you hadn't. Of course not. An interesting looking little system. And by little, I mean huge. It's a huge, beefy system. I did a little research on the old Einstein and found some interesting stuff out about it. This is a machine that, in a small way, well, not in a medium-sized way at least, affected a lot of other bigger, more popular machines.
Yeah.
If you can believe that.
It did.
Let's get into it here. So, the Einstein, they call this the TC-01. Manufactured by Tatung from Taiwan, and this thing came out in '84. Now, of course, in '84, everything was hot and heavy, and this is another one that tried to kind of wedge its way in. This is another Zilog Z80A processor running at 4 megahertz, 64K of memory, unexpanded. This thing has 16 colors. And it did have 3 voice, 7-octave sound. This thing was big. A big monster of a machine with a full typewriter-style keyboard. And that's sort of what got it over with the few people that did buy it. Because this machine, as I found out, and through a bunch of different people in comments, this was a developer's dream machine. They developed on it for a couple reasons, Brent. Now, what were they? For starters, it was the keyboard. Unlike, say, typing stuff in on a Z80 or any of the computers that were out at the time, this had a full proper keyboard, and so it made typing stuff in just easier. I mean, duh. It also had something I never thought about this, Brent, but this is something I saw come up over and over. It had a reliable internal power supply. And they said this was a very stable machine, and they would use this to do development on lots of machines, everything from the Z8s up to the Amigos and the Atari STs. They would do development on this thing, and then they would use the RS-232 to kind of scoot those programs out the back door and export them, and then you're good to go. Kind of neat. The bad part of that is there's not a lot of people back at the pad who are developing computer programs, and so this didn't sell all that well. I should mention that the price on this thing at the time of release was around £500. That's if you consider there were computers selling for £100. This is a lot more. In fact, this is
yes, well done, Aaron.
Thank you. E equals MC banana for me too. But I mean, you're talking. I believe that's somewhere in the ballpark of, let's say, £1,800 for a machine, and that's expensive. Plus, it's just another of the Zilog Z80s that on the pile. It's not like this thing brought a ton of new stuff to the table. So the sales on this thing were low. I will say, I watched a fellow take one of these apart, and of course, the back you had choices on how you wanted to hook this thing up to a monitor. You had a couple different choices. You did have your RS-232 on the back. When you pop this thing open, there's just 2 screws on the back of this thing. You pop the lid on the back, and I will say, in terms of accessibility, this is a pretty nice looking unit. It's pretty well designed, well engineered. Did you get to see anybody open this thing up?
I saw some stuff on it with just its reliability and, like you said, especially the power supply and whatnot. When everyone else was saying how cheap can we make it, the Einstein said how good can we make it. Unfortunately, good was not the call for the day. And they, of course, suffered for it with poor sales. However, it's kind of odd to me that of usually systems like this would be in high praise today, even though they weren't such high praise at their time due to their cost. Right. And I've never heard of this thing. However, the community for this is really strong. The emulation and stuff, they have a few very, very dedicated people that make sure things stay up to date. And because of that, you have really strong emulation. And that made this week's episode so easy to do. I was in and out getting the thing set up in like 6 minutes. I went to a website and they literally just said, you need this file, you need this file. Here's the latest hashtag to make all the latest hash to make all the games work. Bam, done, go. And that was it. I was in. Did you experience the same thing?
Well, I did find. I'm sure I saw the same website, and of course I just set this up in mess, and I really had set it up, no problem. Loading games,
none at all.
Loading games, no problem. The problem I had was just learning the controls on the games and trying to figure out how what keys did what.
Well, that has nothing to do with the system.
But the funny thing is, yes, there is a community for this. But in terms of information on the titles on this, I had all kinds of trouble, which we'll get to that in a moment. I wouldn't say there's a ton of titles for this. There's not a ton of these around.
There aren't.
But I was reading here when Tatung sent these over to the UK in '84. In the summer of '84, it says here 5,000 were exported back to Taipei later that year. That tells me no one was buying these. So the numbers, if they sent back 5,000, one would wonder how many of these exist. And I looked to see if I could find numbers, and I could not. This machine is often compared to the MSX. I think it's an apt comparison. They have the same video modes, the same sound chip. A few other things, but they're not compatible. That limited what you could do with it. And you're right. These guys this thing has joystick ports built in. Like I said, it's got multiple outputs for video. You can even hook this thing up with a SCART cable if you're in the UK. So, which is nice. Again, it had a beefy, more modern PC style power supply with a big switch. It didn't have an external power supply like everything else. This thing actually had a proper power supply, a big one. So this thing was loaded for bear. It had a nice memory sockets. It had everything. It was real. Well, not they weren't socketed, but the memory stuff. If you look at it, it looks more like what you would expect an IBM PC to look like than you would something with a Z80 in it. So this thing also had one of the patented. This thing came with the ability to have two 3-inch floppy drives in it. Well, these 3-inch drives are notoriously crap, and so one thing I read over and over was that often people would hook these things up to 5.25-inch drives, which are more reliable. And also, eventually, people were putting 3.5-inch disk drives in there, which were a much more solid, dependable format than for your disks. But this did have the ability to have two floppy drives right out of the gate, and it came with one. So it did. They like I said, it was fairly expandable. If you look at this thing now, we've looked at some wacky machines. This one actually looks pretty nice, you know. And I could also see why people would want one, you know, because they're very durable looking. But hey,
also
it didn't work.
It also came printer ready.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just plug it in, you've got a printer. So they tried to go with a business aspect as well. Unfortunately, this was just an era where computers were cheap, not necessarily good.
Yeah.
And it just got beaten up in the market because of it.
I should mention, Brent, I thought this was interesting as well. This thing was designed, of course, it was made by Tatung in Taiwan, but it was designed in Bradford, England, at the Tatung Research Lab, and it was assembled in Bridgnorth and Telford, England. So if those mean anything to you, there you go. So this actually was designed in the UK, and that doesn't surprise me a bit, by the way. The fact that it was designed in the UK and built in Taiwan, it actually, that's exactly what you get. It's exactly what it is to me. You know, I think that's kind of neat. So there you go. So with all that said, Brentster, we were tasked with finding a couple games for the old Tatung. You know, this thing had some titles I'd heard of. I mean, it's not like they were all utterly obscure. Yeah. You know, this had some titles you're like, oh yeah, that one. You know, but you know me, I'm a sucker. I'm a sucker for a wacky title, and I'll lead the dance this week on our games. And so I looked at all the different titles, and I had to pick the one that had the coolest sounding title. I ended up going with this one. Bam! Escape from Merlin 8, Brent. I like the idea of the fact that you're escaping from someone named a planet Merlin, and there's 8 of them at least. Pretty cool. So, you know, when you pick these games by cool names, you don't really look into the actual game that much when you're picking it. And so,
man, if that's not a disclaimer, I don't know what
listen,
is.
I'm not burying Escape from Merlin 8, but I am burying information on the Escape from Merlin 8. I'm going to tell you the depths I went to. I didn't phone this one in, brother. I went to work. So, Escape from...
He used the telegraph.
Let's put it this way. Escape from Merlin 8 was produced by Merlin Software. They were a prolific developer, which we'll get to. To put this in perspective in terms of information, I don't know when this came out. Like, there was no release date. Everyone had listed 19, either 7X or XX. Now, I can tell you right now, this didn't come out in 197X because this, that's it, and that's the way it was listed all over the place. 197X. If this came out, my guess would be, this is just a guess, mind you, I'll explain how I came to this guess. My guess would be this came out sometime late in the game. I'm talking like 1989 to 1990, and I'll explain. I know you're thinking to yourself, that's crap.
No, it's not. I understand. I know exactly why you think that.
I'm going to explain why. So, to do some research on this, I found the site that had all kinds of old magazines for the Merlin. But the Merlin didn't have a lot of magazines. Like, they had, as far as I know, they had 3. And one of them, one of the magazines was called Tatung Einstein User. Okay? And I'll get into these magazines in a minute. But I looked through every volume to try to find some mention of this game. And I did finally find one mention of it one time. And this is in all the magazines ever released, okay? They had a Tatung top 10 games, okay? This was the Tatung Einstein User, Volume 4, Number 4, Top 10, 1990. That's the only date that was on it, okay? The top 10 games were Gloop, Aggravator, which that's named after you. Southern Belle, that's named after me. And then number 4, Escape from Merlin 8. All right. And then rounding out the top 10, Rover Ball, Maxima, Starquake, Hustler, Space Traveler, and 256 Game Pack. But Escape from Merlin 8 was number 4. So I would deduce that the game came out sometime around the when Volume 4, Number 4 came out, which is listed in 1990. And since this was so high in the rankings, I would say it was fairly new. So we're going to go with that.
I disagree.
Okay, go ahead.
I think this was released closer to the 80s, 1980, 1981, because it is clearly a ripoff of Buck Rogers' Planet
It is
of
a ripoff, but there's no way this was released before the machine, you dipstick. And it only came out in the Einstein, so you're wrong. And I'll explain. I've got more evidence, my friend. It's not. I'm not done yet. So let's talk about Merlin software for a minute. Merlin did a ton of games on the C64. They did a bunch of stuff. But they did a lot of stuff on the Einstein, including House of Usher, Elite, Starquake, Druid, Attack the Killer Tomatoes, Dead Zone, Sprague, Theater Europe, and Brent. They did the Einstein release. You ready for this? They did the Einstein release of Dragon's Lair. I don't know if you looked at this.
Oh, gosh, I didn't see that.
Oh, yes, my friend. Oh, yes. And I looked at it. It's very similar to the ColecoVision, but not. I found one guy playing it one time and getting on the same level every time. So the footage of that'd be one to go play and create some footage. In fact, all these games, footage was nigh impossible to get, and I have trouble capturing from mess. So I had to depend on whatever footage I could find, found footage, if you will. So anyway, getting back to Merlin software. Now these guys were a publishing label of an outfit called Blagbow and Hebelweight Limited, all right, or they known as B&H Computers. Now get this. They were the leading retailer for the Tatung Einstein microcomputer, okay? So this is why Merlin was in there. And according to what I read, Merlin kept producing software for the Einstein long after it had fallen out of the market. So I have deduced that Escape from Merlin 8 being listed in 1990 in a magazine probably meant it came out between 89 and 90 because these guys were supporting a long dead Einstein computer to keep the ball rolling on it. I should also mention, if you look through these magazines, it's quite sad because they start out with these awesome covers. I mean, awesome. And I mean, they look like D&D like module covers, and they slowly degrade into like a fanzine. It's the saddest thing. I felt so bad for people, you know. But I mean, they were cool magazines at first. So, what do you do? What do you do in Escape from Merlin 8? Well, Britt sort of stole my thunder. Thanks, A. Someone saw Buck Rogers play Zoom and was like, "We can do that," which is fairly. It's an arcade game, but it was more famous more in the ColecoVision, I think, than it was in the arcade. Wouldn't you say, Brent?
I would say the home ports were way more. Yeah.
So this is a multi-level game, and it's funny. Brent got further than I did, and I never saw footage of the levels past 2, so we'll hit him up for the other level. But this game is a real attractive game. By the way, I have no backstory on this. I don't have no tape. I have no back of the box. Nothing. None of that stuff exists as far as I can tell. You roll your spaceship over a sort of a pseudo 3D planet. I will say that the scrolling is very smooth as you roll across this planet. It's one of those gimmicks where they've made the landscape striped, so you can tell the momentum of the ship rolling towards you. It's a cool effect we've seen plenty of times. This game, each screen is split into sort of like mini games. On the first screen, at first you have to go through a certain fixed amount of these space pylons. I don't know what you call these things, Brett, or space gates, whatever you want to call them.
Yeah, you're going through gates to charge up your ship. At least that's my opinion.
Brett writes his own docs, folks. That's okay. I made up the logo, so why not? So once you go through enough gates, then you are attacked by these little jumping critters. All right, I'm going to go with critters. These 3-legged bouncing aliens. And then you have a hit list of how many aliens you have to take out. All this stuff listed at the top of the screen, along with the fuel gauge and the number of men you've got. The fuel gauge, at least in the first level, I would say it's not really a factor. the aliens are, you have to, it's funny, as you start, there are tons of aliens, you're killing them, but as you run out of aliens, I assume the aliens on the screen are the actual amount of aliens you have to kill, because when you're done, there are none left.
Yeah.
So it gets actually,
yeah, that's what it
it's
is.
surprisingly difficult to finish off those last couple aliens, because they'll appear on different parts of the screen. This spaceship's not exactly zipping around, if you know what I mean. It sort of meanders across the planet. You know what I'm saying? This is like the Chevy van of spaceships. It just takes its time.
Oh, it's not that
Well,
bad.
I mean, I'm just saying it's not fast. You're not going to whip across the screen to get an alien. Usually, you sort of have to wait till, because if you miss one, if you miss them, they'll come back. They'll just start coming back again. They just basically scroll over and over until they're all dead. So once you've gotten past the first level, you roll into the second level, or as I like to call it, the trench level. This is the old. Again, this is also at Buck Rogers. This is the old level where you fly down a trench, and this time you're shooting other critters that are coming at you down the trench. I never got past this level, to be honest with you. I should mention that the ship, this isn't just a game where the ship scrolls left and right. It also can gain altitude and go down, so it can move it on both axes. I found that I didn't really need to use that all that much. Did you use the other axis that much?
No, and in fact, it is incredibly frustrating because shots that you feel should have hit your target in all the scenes, your bullet might pass through what you're trying to shoot, and maybe it was too high, maybe it was too low, but there's no indication. There's no proper indication.
There's no Zaxxon
the up and
meter
down
on this thing.
Yeah, the up and down gimmick on this is a huge hindrance to its enjoyability.
Now, do you remember? Is that a feature of Buck Rogers as well? I don't remember.
Buck Rogers, you could go all over the screen.
I couldn't remember if you could actually gain altitude or not. I will say, I was going to get this later, but we might as well go ahead and broach it now. This game, the hit detection is not that good, and I'm going to be generous here. Sometimes it hoses you, and sometimes it helps you. Frankly, you can actually run into those pylons. I've ran right into it, and it went right through my ship before. And on the flip side, you try to shoot those aliens, and man, they'll take shots, and you'll swear that you killed them, and they'll jump right on top of you, and you're boned. The hit detection not so good on any level. Now, Brent, on the what is past that trench level, if I may indulge you?
Well, I guess you enter some kind of like warp tunnel.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's a lot of squares, multicolored squares that come towards the screen, and you can tell that they veer either left, right, up, or down because they have that graphical representation, and your ship will drift that way just slightly. And you have to shoot a certain number of aliens before your fuel runs out and whatnot. It's a very when I first got to the screen, it hurt my head. I was having a huge problem on focusing on it because the effect is kind of neat, but it's also kind of nauseating.
That reminds me of you.
Yeah, thank you. So, I personally never got past this, but Mitsuyama in our chat did manage to get past it and said after that the game loops and the color of the planet is different.
That's what I had read as well. Green. They just changed its color. So when you told me there was something after that, I was actually surprised. So I was like, "What?"
Yeah, but that final screen with the squares, it's I don't know, it's kind of neat. It's definitely neater than anything else in the game visually, but again, it's also kind of nauseating.
I will say, overall, I like Buck Rogers. I'm one of those people that liked the Buck Rogers Planet Zoom game on the Coleco, and so I like this. I thought this was a pretty impressive visually. I thought it was. I like the fact that you had multiple objectives. I thought that was cool. I mean, yeah, don't get me wrong. This isn't the most awesome game ever, but I mean, it's worth a look. I think it's playable. But I mean, you have to go in knowing that there's going to be some annoyances. And I will say, like you mentioned, the ability to go up and down is more of a hindrance than anything else. I mean, I know why they put it in there because it makes it seem cooler, and it does. But I mean, in terms of playability, if you can't see what level those aliens are on and what level you're on, it makes it real difficult. I always stayed either all the way up or all the way down. I didn't go up and down, because it was just too difficult. And then the second level looks cool, but and this game is sort of hard. Part of the problem is when you're emulating a game like this, and I don't want to judge it too harshly. The keyboard and stuff's a little bit different, so it took me a good while just to get in there and figure out how to set up the keys and stuff. But once you do that, I mean, it's totally playable. In fact, I thought this computer overall was pretty usable. Heck, I was in DOS doing commands and stuff with, wasn't that tough, was it?
Oh no, but I want to comment on this game.
Please.
This is a game that could have been really cool, and then they just botched some of the main mechanics of gaming. Having your shot pass through an enemy because it's either too high or too low, or driving your ship through a pylon for who knows what reason, is inexcusable. And it takes a game that probably could have been something I would recommend going and playing because it's very interesting for the era, whatever era that might be. Yeah. However, with the problems it has with hit detection, and if let's say it's not a problem with hit detection, maybe it's doing exactly what they wanted it to do. Yeah. The perceived problem with hit detection makes this game unplayable.
Well, I don't know about that. I think that's hard.
It does, because it turns the game into something that's fun into frustrating.
Well, I mean,
because when your shots pass through aliens, and the pylon board it's annoying on that board, but the boards after it are 10 times worse. So I can't recommend. I mean, if this is setting up at a party somewhere,
I want to go to that party, by the way.
If this is setting up in a party somewhere, sure, go over and have a look, but don't emulate the system for this. It's not.
I think it's worth looking at to see what the Einstein could do. I think graphically it's very impressive, and
well, you can do that with a video.
And I think the background, like the scrolling mountains in the background, I like what they did. I like the way they did it. But you're right,
visuals are great.
Did miss the mark a bit. We actually got some action this week on Discord in terms of reviews, Brits. By the way, couldn't find any of this stuff on eBay. You forget that.
Oh, yeah. Give me a break.
The boat writes, another collection of mini games this week, although wrapped around a far less interesting premise. I like the idea of having a set number of gates to pass through or enemies to destroy to get to the next level. I don't like the droning setup, which we didn't mention those. They are droning. The lack of on-screen remaining lives or the lousy hit detection. Avoid this game if you value your time. This had, I don't know what boat's talking about, this told you how many remaining lives you have.
Yeah.
So I don't know what he's talking about there. Mitsuyama checked this out as well, Brent. He writes, there are some impressive aspects to this game. The graphics are colorful and the scrolling and sprite scaling are smooth for a game of its age. If we don't know its age.
Absolutely.
However, the sound is uninspiring. It just drones, beeps, and boops. What really let this game down is the awful collision detection. I swear some of my shots seemed to pass right through the enemies. I couldn't tell if it was related to how high I was flying the ship, but it meant that I resorted to holding down fire and hoping for the best, especially on the Star Wars-inspired trench level. Does that sound familiar? We're right there with you, Mitz. I managed to get past the psychedelic tunnel level, and the game just restarts at level 1, but with a different color scheme. Not a game that I'll be revisiting. 4 out of 10, Brent. So there you go.
I think that's fair.
I agree.
I think that is absolutely fair.
Well, I mean, what can I say? It was it had a cool name, man. But that. But I thought it was an interesting game. I was impressed graphically with the way it looked. I thought it was impressive. But yeah, ultimately that hit detection was a killer. So, Brent, what did you bring to the table this week, my friend?
I took a game that was actually released on a couple systems. It was released on the Commodore 64, the ZX Spectrum, the MSX, and the Einstein, and took a look at Lazy Jones.
Oh, yeah.
This, a premise for a game, this is quite awesome. You are a hotel employee, right? And you are supposed to be going through and cleaning the hotel and whatnot, but you don't really feel like doing that. So instead, you go into each of the rooms of the hotel and play video games.
Yeah. Yeah. On a huge
And,
TV.
yeah,
That's a heck of a
and of
hotel.
course, as you're going through the hotel, you've got to dodge some things to get from one room to the other. Up on the top floor uh, is the manager. I'm sorry. On the top floor is the ghost of the previous manager. On the middle floor is a haunted cleaning cart, and on the bottom floor is the current manager. If you run into any of them going from room to room, you lose a life. So you can't do that. This hotel is huge. It has 3 floors and it has 6 rooms on each floor for a total of 18 rooms. Now, 3 of these rooms are not uh, like all the rest of the rooms. You have one room that's just a broom closet, and you just walk in and kind of kick the brooms and walk back out. One room is a bathroom where you go
Yeah.
and use the restroom and leave.
I'd say that
And then
amused me when I walked in there.
and one room is a bar where you do play a game in the bar. You try to stand in front of the bartender and drink your drink while a drunk moves back and forth and kind of knocks you out of the way. All the rest of the rooms on this hotel have humongous, massive televisions with video games playing. And each room has its own video game. So this is, 12 mini games inside of your one massive game. So you will go into a room and the games are random. You don't know what you're going to get when you walk in. And one of the games will be up on the television. And your little guy walks over to the console and you play the game for a set amount of time or until you die. And you get a score depending on how well you do in that game that adds up to a overall score. And whenever you either die or run out of time, your guy leaves the room and you can't go back into that room until you've completed all the other rooms. So it's just a massive mini game collection. Some of the games, I'm not going to go through all of them because there's so many and I don't want to bore people. But Chucky, there's Eggy Chuck,
Yeah.
which is a simplified Chucky Egg game. There is Laser Jones, which is a Space Invaders clone. You've got Res Q, which is a hero clone, where you fly around to rescue the guys. You've got The Hills Are Alive, which is a shoot 'em up similar to Outland, except you're flying horizontally. You've got a thing called The Wall, which is you are building a wall, but it's really just a Snake clone. And all these different types of games. You've got, breakout clones. You've got several different types of shooters. And then you've got some really off the wall games like Wafers 2, where you've got a panel bouncing around the screen and you have to set you've got a ship on the bottom and a ship on the left, and you have to line them up so that your coordinates will shoot and hit the panel that's bouncing around the screen. It's very, very clever. And all the games have these silly little names, and it is a beautiful, beautiful high score game. Now, I want to ask you, Aaron, who do you think made such a wacky little game?
I was wondering if you're going to get into it.
Oh, yeah.
Because when I saw this guy's name, I about fell out of the chair. It was David Whitaker, Brent.
Yes.
Among other things, he did the music. He does a music man, and he did the music for Shadow of the Beast, among a million other things.
Well, I mean, he is super, super famous.
Yeah.
He has done.
So I didn't know he did like actual games, to be honest with you.
Yeah. And he has a few games to his credit. Many would say this is his most famous, I believe. Some others that he's been a part of as ATV Simulator back in 97, Nighttime, which is a pun game back in 86, he was part of Obliterator, but this is one that he took. This was just him, and the story goes that he wrote all of this out in assembly.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, he wrote it all out in BASIC and translated it into assembly so he could put it on some of these different systems. Yeah. And I think he did an excellent job. I think this is a fun game to play once or twice. You're not going to play this forever. Or play it as a high score challenge, because it's a bunch of little fast moving mini games. If you were playing this for a high score challenge, I think it'd be perfect. You can set how many men you get from 1 to 9, and that's really not it. You don't die when you die in the mini games. You only lose a life if you die outside in the hotel, moving from one mini game to another. And there are times when you'll feel like you got a cheap hit in the hotel because the ghost and the mop cart move back and forth even when you're inside of a room. But there is a way, if you enter a door right as they're getting ready to pass the door, you'll never get hit on the exit. I know some people had a problem with when they left a room, they would instantly get hit and lose a life.
Yeah.
So there is a way to avoid it, but it's kind of annoying. A couple other aspects about this I want to mention, Aaron. The music in this is incredible.
Yeah, it should be.
And it's a fun music track, right? But it does something so subtle that I didn't realize it was doing it at first. And then when some of the extra playthroughs I did, I picked up on it. There is a steady beat, and it's very catchy, that plays all the time you're walking through the hotel. And when you go into a room to play a mini game, seamlessly, the beat changes depending on what game you're playing. So you'll have the steady beat and the little tune playing when you're outside, and when you go into a room, you'll get a different song will start. But it just slides it in so perfectly. And every mini game has its own tune. So, there are so many different variations of it, and they all just slide in so perfectly. It is really a testimony to this man's musical genius, and it's something that has been sampled throughout the years. It's actually had some famous music made from it in modern times. So perfect. The other thing is, there is something that makes the MSX and Einstein version different than the C64 and ZX Spectrum version. In the MSX and Einstein version, the game Jaywalk, which is a Frogger clone, is replaced with Wafers 2, which is that horizontal, vertical, line them up and shoot them game. I don't know why that is. I personally would have rather had Jaywalk, the Frogger clone. I think that would have been a nice addition to have one less shooter, but there you go. That's how it goes. Aaron, what did you think of this game? Did you have any idea what you were getting into? Have you heard of this before?
Hell no. I had no idea what this was. I never heard of this one. Man, was I surprised. I'll tell you that right now. Before I get into this, I want to thank Replay Retro. I used a lot of his footage today, and because this is the only guy around that's actually has footage of playing this on an Einstein. So what you're looking at here is video footage he shot off the Einstein. This is a hard game to come by, like anywhere. There's not that many Einsteins, so I'll give the guy full credit. This game, I didn't know what it was, and when it started, I was like, this is going to be crap, because you're in that hallway. And once I learned what the controls were, man, I couldn't believe it. I really couldn't believe how cool it was. This is just like a smorgasbord of tiny games. I was impressed. I mean, and it's got your Space Invaders clones. It's got the ones based on Hero. It's got Breakout. It's got all sorts of. It's got snakes and it's got all this stuff, and it's a ton of different games. It's a great idea, but I mean, it's something you would think that would be, not doable. I guess. I mean, it's because it's got to be vast. This is
32K.
Yeah, I mean,
this thing is 32K.
And
unbelievable.
I'm glad you pointed out the thing about the beat when you go into the room, because I thought that was pretty cool too. I was wondering if you'd mention that. But again,
oh yeah,
this guy's a musical genius, so I expect that it needs to be good, and it is. I like the premise of the game. I read that somewhere, and then when it went over to, it makes me laugh. You get the name fits. He's lazy, but I enjoyed it. The little mini games are surprisingly playable too, aren't they?
Oh yeah. There is one or two duds. There's too many one alien on the screen type of shooters, which was a little disappointing. Again, that's why I would have rather had the Frogger clone. However, I think this is a fun game. I think it's a fun game. Most of the games, you figure out what's going on in 5 or 10 seconds.
What is that?
There's a few.
What is that game for the Wii and stuff? Or it's like
WarioWare.
That's it. That's exactly what this reminded me of. It was like now that one, the gameplay's a lot shorter, but I mean, that's what it reminded me of, where you basically randomly play different stuff. You don't know what you're playing. Who'd have thunk that? That's a cool game. But it's very similar. Did you get that vibe from it?
I mean, it sort of. I think WarioWare is more about you do literally one action and move on. This allows you to play the game for about a minute if you don't die in game. So it's more like a collection of mini games. I think for me, this is more like a Mario Party than a WarioWare.
This is a game that is greater. It's greater than the sum of its parts, as they say.
Oh yeah.
If you couldn't release any of these mini games on their own, but as one big crazy package to kill some time, this thing's your boy. It does a real good job. It's funny, when I was looking back through all those magazines I was talking about. Well, I couldn't find anything on my game, but this game came up all the time. This is one of the biggest games released for the Einstein. I mean, there was no doubt about that. And when I say biggest, I mean most popular, because it was mentioned a lot. It was always in those top 10s. So clearly, this was one that actually had and made an impact. I wonder which system this got released for first. Did you find out?
The dates all are in 1984.
Yeah, there you go.
So,
but I give this. I heartily endorse this game. It's not as graphically impressive as mine, but in terms of gameplay, it's 1,000 times better. Something I wanted to ask you about: I can never go to the top floor in this? I can only go to the first 2 floors. Is there a gimmick to that?
No, just when you get in the elevator, hit up.
I can never get it to go up.
Yeah, no, I got it to go up, no problem.
Did it matter what floor you're on as to what game you played?
I think it's pretty random.
Yeah.
It's pretty random. And when you do go through all of the doors and complete all of the, play all the games, the game continues and everything just gets faster. So, and I did loop this one a couple times, putting it on 9 lives, and you can't set and play this game for hours and hours and hours. This is something you get in, you play for a little bit, or you play with your buddies for a high score challenge, because all of the mini games, there's 4 or 5 of them that are pretty good, and then 2 or 3 of them that are really bad that you don't want to actually play. So to go through the hotel a few times, you get your fill of it, and then you get out, and then you can pick it up, a couple of months later and play through it all again. So do I recommend playing this? Yes. And this is the best version, in my opinion. I looked at the MSX, and I looked at the
C64,
Commodore 64 version, and this is graphically musically, this is the best.
It's interesting.
It does suck.
I think it's interesting that the Einstein could match up to, like, say, the C64 in terms of, because I mean my game was very graphically impressive as well. I wonder.
Oh, this was.
One would wonder what you could have done with this machine given enough time, because they had come out with something called the Einstein, or it was coming out with something called the Einstein 256, which would have been the next in line. That would if and for what I heard, it was just an Einstein with a lot more memory. One would wonder what could have been done with such a machine if it had shipped. Because
I agree.
For 32K, you've got some pretty good action here.
Because everything on this runs smooth as silk.
Yeah. I agree.
So
we did get some Discord action on this, Brent. I'm assuming you didn't find this on eBay, by the way. No.
I didn't even look. Are you kidding
John
me?
Boat of Car Schaller writes, Lazy Jones was a real treat. When I first started playing, I thought it was going to be a Keystone Capers ripoff, but when I got in the first room and saw a computer there ready to play, and then when I realized there were multiple games of various genres in most of the rooms, I was surprised and amazed. What we have here is the first incarnation of WarioWare. Hey, there you go. Me and Boat think alike. For the 8-bit computers, although you get about a minute to play each of these games rather than only a few seconds in the Nintendo franchise, the only part of the game that stumbles is the hallway area where enemies are easily jumped over or avoided. I was also unable to go up to the third level of the hotel. He couldn't do it either. But since I
don't know, man.
But since I did not read the documentation, there's probably a reason why I wasn't able to go up there right off the bat. The Einstein version of this game is the best looking, while the C64 is easily the worst due to its craptacular palette. His words, not mine. Unfortunately, I couldn't get joystick support working through MAME, so I had to use the Spectrum-like split keyboard controls, but I still had fun. Highly recommend it. I should mention here, since I rigged it up, I'll go ahead and go to it again. I did a little comparison between the C64 version and the Einstein. Of course, the Einstein is shot off of screens. That's going to be a little hazier looking. But I'd say they're comparable. I don't think they're that the C64 version looks like crap or anything. I think that's but Bode, he hates the C64's color palette, Brent, for whatever reason. We also had a review sent in from Mitsuyama. He writes, "This is my first time playing Lazy Jones, so I can't compare it to other platforms. The graphics are colorful and the sound and music are okay too. Once I'd managed to work out the controls, I started to get into the game. A nice variety of mini games, although there are perhaps too many shooters. It's not that's what you said, Brent. It's not always obvious what you're supposed to be doing in each of the mini games, and it's a little annoying when you leave a room and are placed directly in front of an enemy with no way to avoid them. To be honest, I would rather play larger, more fleshed out versions of some of the mini games as standalone games. 5 out of 10. So, not bad.
I mean, that's fair.
Not bad.
That's just, I can absolutely understand why some people wouldn't dig this type of I guess almost menu system for all these little mini games. So I don't see any fault in that review.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. There you go. So I found the Tatung Einstein to be painless and, dare I say, enjoyable, Brent. But will that be
I had a good time.
Will that be the result of our next spin? Let's find out. It's wheel time. Bam. All right, Brent. I got the wheel right here. Now we've added... Oh, man, I'm dreading this one, folks. Brent Roy hosed us on this one. We've added to the board type in games. Type in games. So if that comes up, we'll let Brent explain what that's going to entail. Please, God, no. Oh, God, no. And then we've also added, as our retro rewind piece, the ever-popular Super Nintendo, Brent. So here we go. Get this thing fired up.
I could go for some Super NES.
There she goes. She's spinning. And the big winner is... Holy smokes, Brent called it. It's the Super Nintendo, Brent.
Yay!
It's a system I've heard of. You've successfully navigated the minefield, my friend. How did you do it?
Hey, a retro rewind piece. It's been a while.
I could tell by the cheers and applause in the chat room that they all love the Super Nintendo. Brock with a huge burial. I'm not the biggest Super Nintendo fan, but by God, there's a library there. There's no doubt. Yeah. There's a huge library. Brent, any parting thoughts or anything you want to get out there before we take this thing to the house?
I would love to see some modern people take some programming on the Einstein and run with it. Also, I do believe that Lazy Jones is trying to have a modern day equivalent made. I don't know if it's a Kickstarter effort or just talks with developers, but I did see a couple things on it when I was passing through. Also, music and video games. It's a big deal when it's a big deal, and it should be a big deal more often.
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, when you've got a musician like Whitaker of that guy's caliber, you expect a good sound. And by the way, I mean, I could run through. I had a list of the stuff he'd done, and it's all. It would take all show to. I mean, this guy's prolific in his 8-bit and 16-bit musical skills. Quite a genius.
Absolutely.
Hey, we want to thank everyone who showed up in the chat today. Brent, you want to do any shout outs in the chat room real quick?
Hi, chat.
Oh, look at what lazy. It's lazy Brent here. We appreciate you guys, and we'll be back next week. Next week, big time, with some hot, incredibly hot Super Nintendo action. Please join us. Thanks a lot, everybody, and we'll catch you guys on the flip side. Until then, stay lazy.
Thanks for joining us today. We really hope you enjoyed the show. Hello to our YouTube subscribers and our Twitch followers. A special thank you to Duncan Styles for our vector graphics and Bartbit for an amazing closing theme. Want to help keep ARG spinning for as little as $1 a month? You can do so at our new Patreon at patreon.com/ARG Presents. Just like these fine folks. Graham W. Vetke, Rollo, Olaf Hope, Anthony Jarvis, Terry Howard, Gary Heather, John Schaller, The Slow Norris, Frodo NL, Steve Rasmussen, Bernhard Lucas, Chris Folds, Mitsuyama, Jason Warnes, Rob Black O'Hara, Andy Craig, Dave Velociraptor, Retroalgy, Hermsky, John Dykeman, Jerry Dennington, Z9K9, and Mr. B. Don't want to explain another credit card bill? That's okay too. You can help us out by leaving us a positive review on Spotify or Apple iTunes. Have an idea for a wheel piece? Email it to us at argpresents@mail.com. We film live every Sunday, 10 a.m. EDT on Twitch. Hope to see you there.